Welcome to our Swift Epiphanies.
I'm Tanya.
And I'm Emery.
We're a mother and daughter with an admiration
and a little obsession
for Taylor Swift.
In this podcast, we let you in on our discussions of Taylor's artistry,
her genius,
and her poetry.
Her music evokes powerful emotions
and has led to epiphanies both personal and universal.
Come along and join our deep conversations as we share our Swift epiphanies.
Welcome to this episode of our Swift Epiphanies. Today, we're talking about juxtaposition, and specifically the juxtaposition between emotions or experiences that Taylor Swift writes about in her songs. This is a part 2. Today, we're talking about albums Reputation through Midnights. So to jump in, we're going to start with Reputation. For this episode, I was going through and I realized I had this epiphany that most of the songs in this album are love songs. And that was kind of a weird realization for me, because when I think Reputation, I'm not necessarily thinking love songs, but there's only about 4 or 5, depending on how you look at some of them, songs that aren't about love or a relationship that's happy and working out. So that was an interesting realization, but it also made it hard to find some juxtapositions in this album, because a lot of these songs are very similar themes, very similar relationship experiences. A lot of them are a relationship that's kind of hiding but flourishing, or something with a little bit more of an infatuation lover type side of it, but that's still a good relationship. So there wasn't a whole ton of juxtaposition in this album.
So, do you want to touch on some of the light contradictions first?
One of the ones that I like the juxtaposition of is Getaway Car versus New Year's Day, and this idea of not being there in the morning versus being there in the morning. And Getaway Car is very much an out. It's, I found my out. I found my way to escape. Whereas New Year's Day is wanting the big special moments, but also being willing to be there the next morning to clean up and to just be there. And I love the lyric, but I stay when it's hard or it's wrong or we're making mistakes. They're both beautiful songs, but that New Year's Day is kind of that special, I'm going to be here tomorrow. And Getaway Car is finding that way out.
One of the things I like in New Year's Day is the lyric, I can tell you it's going to be a long road. And just the intention and the desire to stick with it and to be there and to be that support and love. And like you said, just being there to clean up after the messes and, having the joy and the fun and the good time and the thrill, and then being there for the mundane and the realistic and the life and all of that. In Getaway Car, one of the things I like about it is, you met me in a getaway car. What do you expect from me? This is what I do. I escape, I leave, I get out, and I take the money.
Yes.
I take all the spoils of this relationship and I run.
I take the money and I turn you in and I'm out and I'm clean.
Right? That's a fun one.
Yeah. I love it. It's definitely one of those that is kind of opposed to what the rest of the album is, but I love it. I think it's so fun.
One of the quick ones that I see is just the feeling and the production of Ready for It and the feeling and production of Delicate. Like such a different feeling and a different take and you just feel very different when you listen to those. In true Taylor fashion, throwing this huge juxtaposition into the fans' world, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think King of My Heart and Ready for It are different sides of a starting relationship. King of My Heart talks about this all at once love, this kind of immediate switch from meeting someone to feeling like they're your everything, the king of your heart. And it's this all at once, you're all in kind of jump into a relationship. Whereas Ready for It, this song is her kind of seeing that this is gonna be something, but she talks about kind of taking it slow, that she's gonna take her time because she can see that future, but she doesn't feel the need to just jump in. She's going to take her time. And then she asks, "Are you ready for it?" To me, this is a lot like Mastermind. Ready for it is this like, I can see the end from the beginning, and I'm going to plan out this almost a slow burn, just this love that builds and builds and builds.
But don't you feel like that is a contrast in the sound of this song versus the lyrics? Because it does not sound like holding back. It does not sound like waiting and biding her time. It sounds like jumping in.
That's very true. And I do think to some extent, this song is about her jumping in the sense of she's laying this plan and she's all in. But I think this is kind of her being all in and taking charge and taking it slow and taking him for this ride. Whereas King of My Heart is kind of her following this person that comes in and she just has this immediate fondness for. So I think they're definitely similar. Again, these are all kind of love songs about this relationship that is kind of thriving despite other people or despite circumstances. But I think there's these cute little, I don't know, different sides of seeing this relationship. Of maybe some days she feels like she's got it all planned out, and other days she feels like she's just falling head over heels and she can't stop the snowball. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that is what life is about. And one day we can feel completely different than the day before. That's cool. I like that one. Speaking about knowing the end from the beginning, you had mentioned endgame and delicate. Is that right?
Yeah. I think endgame and delicate are two very different ideas. And again, it could be the same relationship or it could be different ones, but endgame, it's in that title, it's in what you said, seeing the end from the beginning and kind of seeing the whole relationship between start to finish and wanting to be there at the end, wanting to be that last person for someone. Whereas delicate is, it's also in the name, you kind of are hesitant. It's this relationship that's maybe walking on ice and all they can do is think about the next step. What's the next thing that we're going to do? We can't make any promises, but you can make me a drink. Like just this, what's this next thing that we can do? We won't look at the future. We'll just think about right now because it's delicate. It's not strong yet. It's not solid. It doesn't have that foundation. And that's a big difference between these two songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that wraps up Reputation for us a little bit. Again, we don't have a whole ton of these deep juxtapositions because Reputation's a very cohesive and
Yeah. It's a very thematic and cohesive album. But it surprises me with when you really dive into it, what those themes are.
I think that's the biggest juxtaposition is that the lyrics, they're not what you expect when you first hear these songs or listen to the music.
Well, and that's one layer of it, that it doesn't sound like the lyrics don't match the sound of the song, but also that the themes within this album don't really match the feel and the vibe of the entire album. Because it feels like this should be a more angry, edgy, and it is in the music, but the themes inside that music are lovely. There's some really good deep down love in there, which is a surprise. So, speaking of deep down love, we get to move to Lover, which I am so impressed that she went from Reputation to Lover, because maybe it wasn't as big of a jump as I thought, because like you said, we've started to see that Reputation has so much depth to it and it's not completely angry. But then we get Lover, which is so sweet and like different angles of love. And I think it was hard for me to find contradictions or juxtapositions within Lover because the theme is very Lover. It goes from like, you need to calm down, which is coming from an angle of love, right? Like telling people to stop being angry and upset and hateful, and let's come at this with love. And it's nice to have a friend and lover itself and all of these things that kind of have this cohesive feel of love. And so how do you find the contradiction in that? There's a couple of them in there. And one obvious one is I forgot that you existed versus almost everything. It versus it's nice to have, yeah, it's nice to have a friend. It opposes lover, it opposes a bunch of different things. Because I forgot that you existed is the modern mean. I forgot that you existed is finding a place within yourself to heal and move on from this horrible thing, and to not worry about it anymore, and to not put any more time thinking about this previous relationship or previous falling apart.
Yeah.
And so it opposes almost everything within this album.
And I think it also opposes most of Taylor's discography, because I Forgot That You Existed goes against every song she's written about remembering a relationship, for better or for worse. She talks about memories a lot.
You're
and
right.
how these tiny things will remind her of a person or an experience. And I Forgot That You Existed kind of goes against all of that. It says, this relationship may or may not have happened. I don't remember anymore.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's just that idea that those memories don't exist for this one.
I like that because it really is growth, I think, for her, and a really good example for us. There are things that are going to eat at you if you don't just let them go. There's some things you just need to let go to the point where you forget that it even happened and you move on because you're happy and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about this is how she talks about this experience consumed her before, but she got to a place, she worked through it. She got to a place where she doesn't have to even think about it anymore. And she's moved on, and it's indifferent now. It's not this like big emotion of love or hate. It's just indifferent. And
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I like that you brought in that healing and that kind of mindset, because whether you love someone or hate them, they're taking up space in your mind. They're taking up space. They're taking up thoughts. They're taking up parts of you. And when you're indifferent to someone, that's kind of gone. If you don't love them and you accept that and you don't hate them for the fact that you don't love them anymore, then you don't think about them. They're not taking up space. They're not taking up thoughts. And you can fill yourself and your mind with people that you do love and that do deserve space and thoughts. And
Yeah.
I love I Forgot That You Existed. I think it's so cute. But I do like that you bring up how much it opposes a lot of what she's written before.
It's making sure that your energy isn't put into that person or that experience anymore. Your energy is used in a very different way. It's used in more productive ways.
The other one I had is Death by a Thousand Cuts versus Cornelia Street, specifically because there's a lyric in Cornelia Street where she says, "It's the kind of heartbreak time could never mend." And in Death by a Thousand Cuts, there's the line where she says, "I'll be all right. It's just 1,000 cuts." And kind of that acceptance of this will heal with time. These are just cuts. But Cornelia Street is like the dread of, if this ends, I will never get better. So that's just a simple one. Both of these songs are just beautiful.
Yeah. Death by a Thousand Cuts is up there in my very top favorites because I love her poetry of Death by a Thousand Cuts. It really is one of her masterpieces, I think. And in this album, that one also can juxtapose so many because it's a breakup song and there's not that many breakup songs. There's not that many post-relationship songs within the Lover album. So Death by a Thousand Cuts is an opposition to a lot going on. But I'm so glad she gave it to us because, as I said, it's emerged as one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
So in thinking of giving us, Death by a Thousand Cuts, it may not have been part of her world at that time, but she was still able to write about it. There were two that you talked about that bring in what was happening in her life at the time.
Yeah. To me, this is the depth of human experience and the power of Taylor Swift being able to write this into one cohesive album. The songs I wanted to talk about are The Man and Soon You'll Get Better. And these aren't necessarily juxtapositions of the same type of experience, but these are, I guess, inner conflict, or the way that you can feel two very different ways at the same time in your life. The Man is this power song, this song about, if I was a man, I would be this and this and this, and you wouldn't be able to say anything about it. And specifically, she talks about being complex and cool and an alpha type and a fearless leader. Whereas, maybe she goes home from work, and at work she's feeling this way, like she needs to be valued in the music industry, which is true. But she goes home and her mother is sick, and she feels denial and delusional and fear and just scared about the future. Very different feelings about who you are and what you can do and what the future holds. But it's the same album, it's the same era, it's the same day sometimes, that we can feel absolutely heartbroken and powerful. These two songs evoke those very different emotions very strongly. Soon You'll Get Better, I cry every single time because I just feel that depth of despair, really. But The Man, I also am filled with a very strong emotion of competence and capability and potential for life and society. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. They can be the same day, the same minute, the same hour, the same album.
Yeah. I really love this pairing you've made because it had me thinking so much more deeply about certain things and what to fight for and what things are in my soft spot. Because the reality of The Man is that she does have those qualities. She does have power. She does hustle. She does put in the work. She does all of these things and nobody's recognizing it. Right. And so The Man is,
they're mislabeling it or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, they're mislabeling who she is and what she does. And then Soon You'll Get Better is a very deep acknowledgement of, I can't, I just can't. Like, this is where I crumble. This is where I fall. This is where my weakness is. This is where my soft spot is. I can't be powerhouse in this situation because I just can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do really like that pairing. And you're right. They both bring out some super strong emotions.
Yeah, I love this album because I do think it's one of those that you can really feel the emotion while you're listening to the song. I think in Reputation, sometimes it's easy to just sing along or experience the music and not feel the depth of the lyrics. But I think Lover, it's almost impossible to listen to each of these songs and not feel the emotion that is intended with the lyrics. To me, that's what makes Lover such a special album, is because Death by a Thousand Cuts, you listen to that, you sing along to that, and you feel that just acceptance that you're in pain and that, one day it'll go away, but you just accept the pain. And Paper Rings, you feel that giddy sort of love of wanting to be with someone for forever and whatever. You could live in a shack with them and you'd enjoy your life, you'd be happy. And The Man and Soon You'll Get Better are the same. You just really feel those emotions. And I think that's the power in this album.
Yeah, you're right. So as you mentioned, Lover being very good at, it is what it is and you know what it is, but then we move into Folklore and you don't really know what it is because all of a sudden the autobiographical is so mixed in there and you don't know what's real and you don't know what isn't. The metaphors become a little less defined and it could mean multiple things and it just kind of flows and changes. So we go from Lover, where it feels like I know exactly what she's talking about. I feel the exact same thing, to Folklore, which it's not super autobiographical. It brings in elements of fantasy, of myth, of legend within all of this magical fantasy. Where do you find the juxtaposition?
I feel like you're right. I think that Folklore kind of especially after Reputation and Lover, we get back into this sort of Taylor Swift writing fairy tales in the sense of they can apply to each of us very differently. We relate to different characters in different ways, and it takes us a second longer to recognize what a song might be about for us. But while I was looking for these juxtapositions, I think in folklore they're kind of everywhere because we're starting to get back to this eclectic songwriting of different themes, different experiences, different relationships, whereas Reputation and Lover are more autobiographical. We hear about her relationships, and now we're getting into, oh well, maybe this could be mine or someone else's. And
I think one way to explain it is Lover and Reputation were very thematic in the topics. And then Folklore and even into Evermore are very thematic in the feel. And so the topics aren't necessarily the same within all the songs, but the feel of it and the emotion and kind of that realm of fantasy is thematic, but yet the topics are all over the board.
Yeah.
There's a really simple one in Folklore, I guess. I mean, I don't know if it's really simple, and I don't know if it's a juxtaposition, but it's a contrast. It's coming at one relationship or a triangle relationship from three different points. And that's Cardigan and Betty and August. And her writing from the actual perspectives of all of those points of the triangle and doing that very well and exploring the inner thoughts and intentions and perspectives of those three people. That's kind of a contradiction. It's something she hadn't done before, is taking this whole triangle and saying, here are three completely different views of the same situation, and not making any one of them be like the bad guy. I mean, there's kind of that element in there of, bad choices, but it's this kind of murky, shady triangle of perspectives.
Well, and I think that's true. Anytime you see from two different people's perspectives, you're seeing a contradiction or a juxtaposition. The two that I specifically think of are the two girls from August and Cardigan, and they're two very different people, and you can kind of see their characters come to life in these songs. I love Cardigan. Cardigan's my favorite of the three, specifically because this girl feels like she is more mature and she realizes what love and relationships are more than those around her. She says, when you are young, they assume you know nothing. And Cardigan kind of has this feel of someone who sees deeper than the surface and who recognizes the little details of a relationship more than the other person or more than the world around her, of seeing a relationship as more than a fling. And in August, it's a fling. She certainly wants it to be more than a fling, but it's getting lost. It's this kind of spur of the moment. Let's just do something fun to do something fun. That mindset is very different. One sees the depth of relationships and of love, while the other is seeing the fun and the excitement and the thrill of running around with someone that you like.
I have kind of always seen August in the light of, you teach people how to treat you. She is settling for the way that he's treating her and kind of, she's going to take what she's going to get. I kind of feel like August doesn't know her worth. And so she allows James to treat her this way, and she allows James to use her and to kind of be in this frivolous fling relationship. My heart breaks for August.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. She doesn't know that she deserves more than someone who's got another girl, and he's in a sense just having fun, making mistakes, being 17. And I don't know.
Yeah, that is an interesting love triangle right there. In what other situation have we seen a love triangle from every angle? It's kind of interesting to dive into their inner thoughts and feelings and, like you said, their character and who they are. So one pairing that I thought of with Folklore is Exile versus Invisible String. simply because exile is kind of pushing somebody away and putting a barrier and putting this space between you and that person and realizing that that space has to be there. But the invisible string is kind of seeing this possible connection, or at least how the paths of your lives have brought you to this place together. And so there's this string connection and kind of this force connection between two souls. But exile is breaking every connection between the two souls, because exile is not just an ending, it is a banishment. It's
Yeah.
a complete distance. It's an unequivocal break of that
Yeah.
relationship.
Well, and I think too that brings in the difference as well of choice versus fate. And, sometimes you have to choose to let someone go, and other times it feels like it's fate that they fall out of your life. And on the other hand, sometimes you choose to let someone in and love someone, and other times you feel like it's fate that brings them into your life. And so I think this is kind of a good example of one side of that, of feeling like fate brings someone into your life, that you're tied to them by some force, as opposed to choosing to send someone away because you're not good for each other anymore and you have to choose to let that go. Exile is very much not a fate took us apart. It's one of us had to make the decision to kick the other one out because this wasn't working and you weren't seeing how it wasn't working.
Yeah, there's kind of this obliviousness to how bad it's gotten. But yeah, folklore is not all about love and roses.
Yeah. And speaking of that, one of the other contradictions that I was thinking of is My Tears Ricochet versus This Is Me Trying. They're both kind of this heartbreaking situation, but I think where I was seeing these two songs is a juxtaposition of feeling hurt and somewhat vindictive, somewhat vengeful of this experience, this person that hurt you, versus This Is Me Trying is I'm doing my best and I'm trying to fix something or find something or do something that's going to make something work, and not being able to get there. And so I don't know, I just feel like they're very different songs and just different emotions, whether they can be labeled or not. I think these two songs have very different feels.
I would totally agree with all of that.
Yeah. One of the pairings that I thought of is Peace and Mirror Ball. And it's kind of, even when I picked it out, I thought it was kind of a weird pairing. But Mirror Ball, I feel like, is the point of view of someone who recognizes that they're kind of in the center and they want to do everything they can to fit in or to be the person for someone. She says she can change everything about her to fit in, and she's shining just for you. And, this person that can be what someone needs, and that desire to almost change yourself to be that. Whereas peace is kind of a recognition and almost a question of, am I enough? If I'm just me and if I'm just doing what I can, will it be enough if I can't be exactly what you need all the time? What are your thoughts on this pairing? Because it's kind of an interesting one that's almost half baked, that I don't have super solid thoughts on.
Well, I hadn't thought of it, but I totally see where these two could be paired up in this topic because, Mirror Ball is her or entertainers or people that are trying to please. And even though they're broken, they're like reflecting everyone and they're shining. And there's this expectation with them that they will continue to shine and that they will continue to be what we need them to be when we need them to be that. So I can see that paired with peace because she's in a relationship where she can't give her partner peace. Because she's a mirror ball, there will always be a light shining on her. There will always be people around her. There will always be this frenzy of her to be something and to do something and to act a certain way. And so in her relationship, she acknowledges that she's always going to be a mirror ball, but is that okay? I love it because she is willing to give so much to this relationship, but she knows there are a few things that she can't control and that she can't give, no matter how hard she would try. And she's acknowledging that. And she's asking if all the other things that she does are enough to make up for that one area where she can't give him peace. Yeah, that's an interesting pairing.
I love that though. And it also reminds me of the lakes and the last great American dynasty because it's almost this same situation of the lakes is kind of like that piece that I wish we could just run away where all the poets went to die because we don't belong in this world of society and paparazzi and whatever else. And the last great American dynasty is kind of the opposite of that. It's kind of this desire to be that crazy quirky woman that owns the house that everyone just gives a side eye to. I think it brings back these two worlds that live in the same place at the same time but that are very different, and the desire to have both, almost the desire to have this house in the middle of town where people look at you and watch you and see you, versus wanting to run away to the lakes and to be hidden and to not be seen. It's an interesting contrast for sure.
You're right. Well, in moving from folklore to Evermore, I absolutely love the flow into this album. So, right from the beginning in Evermore, we go from Willow to Champagne Problems. And I feel like those are very different vibes. They're very different stories behind them. They're very different visual images of where these would take place or the things that you think of when you hear the lyrics to them. And Willow is this kind of conforming to somebody else and to like following somebody else and being that in love and committed almost in an unconditional way. Like no matter what this person does, I will follow them. Just being drawn to this other person, not only in like your feelings, but in your behaviors and in your actions and following them and doing anything and everything that they do. But I kind of feel like it starts going in this unhealthy way of losing yourself and not quite having your individuality. And then Champagne Problems comes right next in the album. And it is a very different thought process of this girl who's kind of been in this relationship. Granted, it sounds like it was a good relationship, and he obviously finds it deeper than she does. And then all of a sudden she's done and she's out and she's like, I can't do this forever. I can't commit to this as much as committing in Willow. Like you are committed in Willow to everything about this person. And in Champagne Problems, it's like the minute this commitment comes up, I'm out. I can't do this. I'm messed up in the head. Even when you're on show for him and all of his family and friends, you're like, I still can't commit to this. Maybe also in Champagne Problems, it's this fear of conforming and this fear of bending to him and his lifestyle and his family and the expectation of what that relationship would bring, not wanting to be a Willow to that relationship and feeling like, you don't know the answer until the question is posed. And he's on his knees asking, and all of a sudden you do not want to conform to that. You realize you can't be that person. You can't be what that other person needs. And you can see that there in the future will be somebody that will be a better Willow to him, but you just can't be it. You just can't do it.
I really like that because I think in Willow, it gives off the idea that if he would ask her to marry him, she would say yes, no questions, no hesitation, no pause. She would say yes. In Champagne Problems, no matter how good this relationship was, the second the question is asked, she has this realization that the answer is no. Whether she thought it would be no or not, she says no and realizes that, oh, if I said no, then I guess this is over. I guess that it'll be someone else someday. I guess that it's just not me. I don't know. In Champagne Problems, I kind of imagine her saying no and then kind of doing almost a double take of, wait, did I just say no? And then kind of that realization that, yeah, I did say no and I meant no. And maybe I still have to process why I said no, but I'm confident that it's a no. And that recognition that she's fully and completely herself in that moment and what she wants and recognizing what she thinks and needs, whereas Willow is the complete abandonment of any of those thoughts of who am I, what do I need, and how do I need to respond to this situation.
Yeah. So I feel like Willow could be a healthy perspective, but it also could be an unhealthy perspective. I just haven't decided that yet on Willow.
Mm-hmm.
Another way we could pair champagne problems is with tolerate it. And perhaps it would have been the result if she had said yes, she would be the one tolerating the relationship, even though in the song, it's definitely the guy tolerating the girl in the relationship. But so, yeah, champagne problems is that whole idea of getting out of the relationship, and tolerate it is perhaps the man getting in the relationship, even though he doesn't want to be in it and he's tolerating it. And it could have been that way with champagne problems. Had she given in and said yes, she would have had expectations, but tolerate it feels like a totally different situation where either she didn't get out of the relationship soon enough or he didn't get out of the relationship soon enough. And this is the result of saying yes to somebody you probably shouldn't have said yes to, or
Mm-hmm.
asking somebody that you probably shouldn't have asked. And here you are tolerating life. Maybe it's the result of Willow too. It could be the result of Willow or champagne problems. Had either of them ended up in marriage, this could be that kind of marriage that she is Willow and bending to everything and he doesn't want her to, versus champagne problems. If they had gotten together, one of them would have tolerated the relationship and that's where it would have ended up. But Evermore is quite like folklore in that there's so many different stories and ideas and thoughts and imagery in it. But there's two that I wanted to talk about that are super deep in their contradiction and in their juxtaposition. And that is Right Where You Left Me and It's Time to Go. And these are both bonus tracks.
I think this is one that you can definitely hear the juxtaposition just in the titles. We kind of talked about that in part one with I'm Only Me When I'm With You and Cold As You, where you just immediately get that sense that these are two opposite songs. And I think this is another pairing that's like that, where you can tell that Right Where You Left Me and It's Time to Go are going to be very different, and they are.
Yeah, the titles evoke that complete dissonance of emotion and feeling. So, Right Where You Left Me is being stuck in the moment, stuck in the past, and not being able to move on, just living this over and over and over. Not only the good, but the moment that it ended, and living that over and over and hoping for a different ending every day.
Yeah, it's that inability to let go of something that you either loved or that you just needed. Sometimes it's just a need for a relationship in a healthy or an unhealthy way. I think Right Where You Left Me, it's this unhealthy attachment to someone that once they leave, you can't function. You can't be yourself. You can't move on. You're just living that moment over and over again, like you said.
It's not just him that's moved on and has a new family, it's the whole world. It's obvious to everybody around her that she is stuck in this moment and she's right where he left her emotionally, physically, mentally, all of that. It just shows this sad inability to move on and delusion. My heart breaks with that song. And then on the flip side is It's Time to Go, which is now one of my favorite pieces of advice that Taylor's ever given, because there are moments where you need to call it and you need to recognize when those times come and you have to call it. You have to take a stand. You need to go. You need to end something. You need to do that. And I love that she brings in, sometimes it's the strongest thing to do and the bravest thing to do. And it's the one thing that will find you the right thing by letting go, saying goodbye, ending something. And so that's very different than just sitting in the past forever and ever and ever.
This is moving even when it's hard and leaving, even if there's something that you've been holding on to that could keep you back. You just know when it's time. And in Right Where You Left Me, there's no moment of recognition that it's time to let go.
Yeah, you know when it's time to go. But I love what you said of even when it's hard. So the pain and the difficulty is going to happen, but you have to do it. You have to take that step. You have to move forward. I love both songs. Both of them give heartache for very different reasons.
Yeah. Sweet. And then there was Midnights. Midnights is so fresh. And so when I was going through trying to look for these contradictions, I was finding them left and right. We were talking about this in our 3 a.m. bonus episode that this album is whiplash, specifically the 3 a.m. version songs, but I think the whole album is whiplash when you're going through, and they're very different themes. They're very different songs. There's a lot of juxtaposition in this album because it's so eclectic. It's so different, and there's a lot to take in.
I think that was the intention behind Midnights, because she talked about that there's so many different things that keep you up at night. And obviously, one night you can feel the fantasy and the happiness and the joy, and one night you can feel the destruction and the disappointment. And we talked before about at midnight and 3 a.m., those emotions are bigger than life. They're bigger than reality. And because of that, the juxtapositions get polarized even further, I think.
Absolutely. I think we can't talk about juxtapositions in this album without talking about Antihero and Bejeweled. Her two singles on the album, I think these two songs together fit into this theme of our episode so well, because to me, in this context, Antihero is almost imposter syndrome-esque. It's this idea that you're a sort of villain in fame, and that she doesn't see herself as the person that we all see her as.
It's also like she doesn't feel she's earned her place in that fame or that level of celebrity.
Yeah. But then we have Bejeweled, and it's just so clearly an opposite, a confidence in herself that she doesn't show in Antihero. This idea that she can stand in the middle of a room and shine and shimmer and be the center and be the celebrity and have the fame and feel the joy of the life that she has. And at the same time, she goes home and she feels like an anti-hero. And I just think it's so interesting how well she writes about these two sides of herself. And I love that we get this autobiography back into this album, because we see her really talking about her inner self. And that's where I think we find the most contradictions in our lives, are in our real, true, personal emotions.
I think you're spot on with that. Many times we're kept awake by our insecurities and the thoughts of what we are not. But then other times we're like, yes, I can do that. And I'm going to prove you wrong. Those two are pretty obviously juxtaposed.
Yeah. Another couple simple ones that I wanted to emphasize are Mastermind and Glitch. Kind of this idea that one is a very meticulously planned relationship and the other is an accident, almost something that was supposed to be avoided, was supposed to be sweated out, that almost overnight became something much, much bigger and deeper, and became 2000 Days of Love Blackout. And then another one that I love is Maroon and the Great War, because we see this in a couple other pairings from episode 1, but this idea that the memories and the experiences and the little things between two people can either build up to something great or can just slowly eat away at a relationship. And in the Great War, we see that this relationship is strong enough to withstand the bullets or the battering or the beating of the walls. It can last. And those little things that build up in a relationship build stronger walls in the Great War. Whereas in Maroon, it just kind of falls apart. And we see in the lyrics that she talks about the silence coming and losing sight of each other and sobbing with your head in your hands, and that it always ends. And this idea that all of these little memories became the past, became something that they couldn't work through. But in the Great War, they have this fight and they almost fall apart, but they don't, and they stay strong, and they come back stronger.
That's beautiful. I like that. That's a pretty good one. One thing I wanted to touch on really quickly, because we did talk about Dear Reader in the 3 a.m. bonus episode, but Dear Reader is kind of this contrast of, I've got advice to give, but please don't listen to everything I say. So don't make me the one person you take advice from. But yet, here are some things I've learned along the way. Take it for what it's worth in your life. So I liked that.
Yeah, and there's definitely that hint of irony of she gives advice in the song that she's telling us not to take advice from. and I just think it's very cute. It's very her, but it's definitely that contradiction of, I'm saying one thing, but I'm also saying another thing. And I kind of want you to listen to both, but they don't go together. It's always fun.
So that's a good one to end on and wrap up our talk on juxtaposition. Although we will have a bonus episode next week where we talk about hoax. And I'm super excited for this conversation because Emery brought up some amazing thoughts and ideas and perspectives on hoax that I can't wait to talk about.
I can't take all the credit. It was inspired from Taylor Swift, her thoughts on the song that got me thinking and then got us thinking. So thank you for listening with us today, talking about this human experience that we're in and how Taylor helps us to feel more okay with these contradicting feelings that go on inside of us at any given moment.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Our Swift Epiphanies.
Follow us on social media at Our Swift Epiphanies for behind the scenes and bonus content, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive video content.
Get in on the conversation by commenting or messaging us with your Swift Epiphanies.